Assalamualaikum sir, I am NURSAHFIRAH binti SAPRI from group 2. So our group have chosen the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. So as introduction, Korea was freed from Japanese rule in 1945, marking the conclusion of World War II. The Soviet Union occupied North Korea and the United States occupied the South Korea. The country was split in half by 1948 at the 38th parallel, with Kim Il-sung ruling the Communist North and Syngman Rhee leading the capitalist South. Soon, in 1948, North and South Korean are rivals, so they would not accept the border as permanent. On 25 June 1950, North Korea launched an attack on South Korea by crossing the 38th parallel. The North Korean People's Army, consisting of 75,000 soldiers, successfully beat the Republic of Korean Army, capturing the capital city of Seoul, then occupying the whole of South Korea except for Busan. This was a challenge since President Truman and the US intended to stop the domino effect from spreading communism. That is, if Korea succumbed to the idea, other nations would follow soon. The United States pushed a resolution through the UN Security Council in response to a request for assistance from South Korea. The Security Council requested North Korea to remove its troops, but it received no response. As a result, permission was given for a UN army led by General MacArthur and composed of an international force of 60 nations to send assistance to South Korea. Early in July, mostly American-made UN troops arrived in South Korea, but they were quickly forced to defend themselves against North Korean forces. The US Marine Corps conducted an amphibious assault on Incheon on 15 September. By the end of the month, Seoul and the entirety of South Korea had been taken over as the North Korean troops were forced to flee over the 38th parallel. President Truman gave his approval despite being concerned about Chinese retaliation, and the UN soldiers entered North Korea on October 7, 1950. They took control of Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, on October 12, and subsequently the Yalu River, which served as the country's boundary with Communist China. China retaliated by sending 250,000 Chinese troops. The UN forces were driven out of North Korea with significant casualties after being outnumbered by this new army. Seoul had been taken over by North Korean and Chinese forces by January 1951. More UN soldiers were dispatched to Korea in June 1951, causing the North Koreans to retreat to the 38th parallel and stabilizing the front. Peace negotiations started in July, but a solution was not found. Early in 1953, General Dwight D. Eisenhower took over as president and sought an end to the war. An armistice was signed on July 27, 1953 at Panmunjom along the 38th parallel. Following 2 years of negotiations, a demilitarized zone was established, and it still exists until today. Next, I will discuss about the factors or issues involved in the Korean War that happened in 1950 to 1953. As we all know, Korea was seized as part of the Japanese Empire in 1910. After a stunning defeat of Russia, the world was forced to accept that Japan was a new world power, and Japan itself was eager to add to its territories. Upon Japan's defeat, however, something needed to be done about its former imperial holdings. Ultimately, the nation was divided along the 38th parallel, and in a bid to seek to pacify the Soviet Union, Soviet forces were allowed to take control of the north, and the Americans would take control of the South. Nobody, by the way, had bothered to ask the Koreans what they themselves wanted. By 1950, both leaders wanted to reunify Korea under their own rule, and border skirmishes between the two nations were common. For the United States, the conflict was not a border dispute between two rival nations, but rather part of a larger and growing struggle between the forces of communism and democracy. The United States considered non-interference an impossibility, and a secret National Security Council report even recommended that the United States need to use military force to contain communist expansionism anywhere in the world, regardless of the intrinsic strategic or economic value of the lands in question. This anti-communist sentiment will in later years lead to the domino effect theory, which claimed that if one nation was allowed to fall to communism, it would pave the way for many others to do the same. While the anti-communist favor of the US will come to be derided by later generations, the truth is that the Soviet Union very much wanted a unified communist Korea, also believing that an ultimate confrontation between democracy and communism was inevitable, and if that fight was to come, then the only way for any side to survive was to have the most allies. In short, everyone believed that the World War III was inevitable. As negotiations took place, fighting continued along the 38th parallel until finally, after 2 years of negotiations, an armistice was signed on July 27, 1953. A ceasefire which lasts to this day was immediately put into effect, but a satisfactory end to the Korean War was never achieved. Sadly, hostilities between North and South are still at an all-time high, and the continued backing of Russia and China allow North Korea, impoverished as it is, to survive.
Assalamualaikum, sir. I am NURZAFIRAH binti ABDURAHMAN. Next, I will discuss the party involved in this Korean War. The Korean War was a civil war that became a proxy battle between the superpower as the clash of communism and democracy. Regarding history, Korea was a unified kingdom for centuries before Japan annexed it following the victory in the Russo-Japanese War. The Japanese ruled over Korea with an iron fist from 1910 until 1945. As we know, they used assimilation tactics like forbidding the Korean language and de-emphasizing Korean history in favor of Japanese culture to weaken their colony. When Japan surrendered to the Allies following the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II, control of the Korean passed from Japan to US. Scattered border skirmishes from 1948 until 1950, which is kept pension and submarine. By 1950, the South was controlled by anti-communist SIMBIH, which the US very reluctantly supported. The North, however, was enthusiastically supported by the Soviet Union, which had installed Kim Il-sung as a leader in terms of the parties that were involved in the Korean War. The Soviet set up a communism government in Seoul. At first, the US initially didn't want to get involved in any kind of invasion. The US didn't want to tingle up with North Korea, much less or the Soviet Union. But for the sake of world peace, after the outbreak of World War II, the US decided to intervene in ensuring the Soviet Union and China cooperated in spreading the idea of communism spread on both sides of Korea and other countries that will also follow it, and this will cause a serious wars that will lead to World War III to have take place around the world. The US never officially went to war with North Korea because the US wanted to keep the idea of democracy alive. North Korea, on the other hand, wishes to extend its communism power to South Korea. Therefore, South Korea, under an anti-communism government, fought with North Korea under communism government in Korean War, starting from 1950 until 1953. That's all for me.
Hello, I am TABITHA SIMBIH GILINGAN. Next, I will discuss the international relations theory that our group chose regarding the Korea War. Given that the Korea War lasted for 3 years from 1950 to 1953, the Korea War can be linked to the theory of realism when South Korea and North Korea wanted Korea to be a country governed under one administration after they were separated by the 38th parallel. Under the leadership of Kim Il-sung, North Korea was assisted by the Soviet Union and China, while South Korea, under the leadership of Syngman Rhee, was assisted by the United States and the United Nations, with a combination of 16 countries. Why can the Korea War be linked to the theory of realism? This is because North Korea leaders are very concerned about the power that will be in their hands to control the whole Korea under their administration. This theory of realism demonstrated in the Korea War made it clear that they had to act by maximizing their own self-interest even when they needed to use force to gain power. In the realism theory, it is also mentioned that every state tries to maximize their power and minimize the others. Just as North Korea wants to maximize their power to control all of Korea land, in inevitable conflicts between North and South Korea shows that there was a neglected of the humanitarian element and made cooperation between the two states difficult to achieve. Until today, we can see North and South are still separated by demilitarized zones.
Hello sir, I am Julius from Group 2. Next, ANNESONIZYE and I will discuss the suggestion that could be implemented to avoid the Korean War between South Korea and North Korea. After analyzing a few articles about the war that happened in Korea, our group has picked out 4 points that we think will stop the South and North Korean war from happening. The first one that I will explain is to reach out to understand the other side's value, and both personal and cultural, and the second one is to refrain from ideological rhetoric over politics and religion. They believe that both of these points can help the Koreans from going to war in the future. To explain the first solution, the fog of war descends from two adversaries know nothing about one another. The result is a war based on projections and prejudice. The goal is mutual acceptance from both sides. At the deepest level, we all want the same thing, which means both the North and South Korean sides believe that both sides should have the consideration of knowing each leaders believe and why they want to keep their own respective government system. The same is true for the second point. Any country may avoid conflict by refraining from using ideological rhetoric about politics and religion. The events that occurred between South and North Korea show that the leaders of both nations have distinct ideas about how to run their respective countries for the sake of their respective political interests and dominance of power. North Korea and South Korea should think of an administration that can guarantee the sovereignty of both sides instead of being at war with each other. Both leaders should endeavor to create a win-win solution that does not necessitate a conflict.
Hello sir, my name is ANNESONIZYE JAMIL from Group 2. Next I'll be explain on how I recommend settling the war between South Korea and North Korea through entertainment. Peace via entertainment between South Korea and North Korea can be achieved through cooperation and solidarity between civilian community of these two countries. Artists, singers, and crew members from this country play an important role in spreading soft peace. This soft power diplomacy via pop music will help pave the way for the leader of North Korea and South Korea to make a joint progress in reducing tension and ending 73 strands of that divide the Korean Peninsula and its people. Through the alternative diplomacy such as sending artists between these two countries, the government can show their own people and the world that they are willing and trying to achieve lasting peace. These kinds of solidarity and cooperation will be driving force in creating a peaceful culture of coexisting that seek universal value and tolerant diversity. North Koreans watch South Korean television movie because it shows the level of affluence that the vast majority can only dream of. Furthermore, North Korean music may have pop beat, but it conveys a very different message than music in South Korea, while exotically dressed stars in South Korea sing about their relationship and love. Their more sober attire, North Korean counterpart perform music in honor of social region. From this, we can say that the entertainment can help improve the relationship between South Korean and North Korean and bring peace to the people of both countries. Last but not least, the tension between South Korea and North Korea can be resolved through dialogue and negotiation. Dialogue between South Korea and North Korea is important to increase the clarity of the problem. When facing conflict or crisis situation, the first step should be assess whether to attempt to resolve the confrontation or whether to make dignified withdrawal. The safety and security of the civilians and the country should be first prioritized. Negotiation succeeds when there is a balance of power between two parties, in which when negotiation between South Korea and North Korea is achieved, it will help to reduce the impact or trigger of the war. Therefore, if South Korea and North Korea want to make things less tense between them, they need to start talking and negotiating in a way that is based on mutual respect. Thank you.
As a conclusion, since the Korea War happened in 1950s, a lot of soldiers from both countries were killed during the war and many succumbed to starvations and hydrations. This happened when the United States soldiers who suffered from logistics and supply problems were unable to withstand the heat until were often forced to refill their drinking canteens from rice paddies that had been fertilized with human waste. This led to outbreaks of disease and illness among soldiers. After that, the war lasted for 3 years until an armistice was declared on July 27, 1953. Since then, Koreans have seen the war as the second greatest tragedy in their recent histories. After Japanese colonial rules, not only did it cause devastations and 3 million deaths, it also confirmed the divisions of a homogeneous society after 13 centuries of unity, while permanently separating millions of families. Meanwhile, U.S. wartime spending jump-started Japan economy, which led to its emergence as a global power. Instead, Korea have had to live through the tragedy of reunifications as diplomatic tensions and military clashes along the demilitarized zone have continued to this day. And both countries still think they are the only legitimate government of all of Korea. And that's to conclude our presentation for my group. Thank you.